after a Greater Manchester police officer was suspended after being filmed kicking and stamping on the head of a man at Manchester Airport. Protesters gathered outside the force's headquarters last night after the video was shared widely online. Well, let's speak now to the CEO of the Islamophobia response unit, Majid Iqbal, who's joining us live from Nottingham. Majid, thanks so much for being with us and for giving us the time this afternoon. I mean, what's the feeling in the community after that video has been spread so widely?
Well, thanks for having me on. The feeling is utter outrage and shock, in all honesty, throughout the night and in the circumstances of the event being made known. We were contacted by lots of people. People are very upset, and rightly so, because of the unjustifiable actions of the police, the violent actions of the police. And I'd like to point to some of those in particular, with the individual laying on the floor and having been stamped on and kicked in the head with an officer using steel toe caps. And you also have the other individual behind him, seemed to be quite compliant, also knocked to the floor and hit in the head. You also have innocent bystanders who were simply recording, one of which was pepper sprayed, and the other individual, he was forcibly searched unlawfully, potentially, and his phone's taken from him forcibly. I think these actions are completely unreasonable and unjustifiable, and quite rightly, the whole community and the Muslims and non-Muslims alike are completely shocked.
Majid, have you been in touch with anyone who's been involved in this, either those that were involved in the incident that we're seeing in the videos, or with their legal representation, and what's been said?
So we have made contact with the family via their solicitor, who's Ahmed Yaqub. So we've offered our full support as the IRU in relation to any support that's needed by the family. And I think that's important. In terms of our support, we also represent the interests of the community. I think that's important because the statement by the Greater Manchester Police was completely unreasonable and unjustified. Initially, what they did was they seemed to move away from culpability of the officers by simply saying that they could have been disarmed, which is just a completely unreasonable view. And then they sought to issue an additional statement, which stated that one officer had been suspended. And I think more robust action was needed, actually. And they ought to have suspended a number of the officers involved, those using the tasers, and those involved in using the pepper spray as well.
Just explain further, Majid, if you can, why you think it was disingenuous for the first statement from GMP to suggest that because there were firearms officers, they could have been disarmed, as some kind of explanation that they were using for the force that people had seen in the video.
Well, I'll go back to the lack of justification. You're allowed to use reasonable force in these types of circumstances. And the force was clearly unreasonable and actually violent. The individual on the floor was clearly incapacitated. He'd already been tasered. What benefit was there to stamping on his head and kicking him in the face? He was already incapacitated. The other individual was clearly compliant. And if an individual is compliant, they should be given the opportunity to comply with any requests that are made. I mean, in terms of the statement, as I say, I don't think it was sufficient. And I think they were quite slow, actually, in bringing in the IOPC in terms of their involvement. Whilst that's welcomed, we'd actually call on an independent investigation by the Mayor's office, Andy Burnham, because the public requires accountability and transparency. And we'd like the Mayor's office to work with organisations like the IRU to provide that transparency and accountability.
OK, well, that call has gone out to Andy Burnham to work with you to try and get that accountability and transparency. Now, you said you've been in touch with the family of these individuals involved, and as you'll know from the video, there was a woman there who was wearing a saria, who was being pushed away by the officers, and there is some reporting online. It's not exactly clear as to what kind of condition she is in. There is some reporting that she had a blackened eye, she was injured in some way. Can you clear that up for us, Majid Iqbal, and what's happened to her at this point?
The full facts of the matter aren't entirely clear, but it's been alleged, actually, that she was struck in the face by a police officer, in addition to her being pushed. I mean, you can see the push on camera. There isn't footage as yet that I've seen where she's been struck in the face by an officer, but that's what's been alleged. And I think that's why we need the CCTV footage. We need all of the other footage from individuals who were present, so that a full and transparent investigation can be carried out.
Sorry, yeah, thank you for finishing the point. In your initial conversations with those involved, do you know if the officers there had police-worn body cameras on?
Well, I haven't had direct conversations with those involved. As I say, our involvement in terms of the family and the contact that we've had is via their legal representative. So initially, some of those conversations have been quite limited, clearly because he's representing the family in the way that he ought to. And what we need to do is to have further conversations to understand precisely what's happened, and in line with analysing the evidence from the Greater Manchester Police and from Manchester Airport, we can then provide the relevant support that's required to the family.
Look, I do appreciate you being with us on this, Majid, because you have more insight and you have sort of more overview of what may have happened, because all that we've been able to do is sort of see the videos online and listen to the police statement. The police, as you'll know, has said that 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of assault of an emergency worker, affray and obstructing police, and 2 other men have been arrested on suspicion of affray and assault of an emergency worker. Are you aware who those 4 individuals are in context of the video that we have been able to see?
No, unfortunately, I don't have the full details of those 4 individuals. But what I can say is clear from the evidence on social media that the actions of the police were completely unjustified and extremely violent, and that needs to be called out. And I think that has been. But another call out to Andy Burnham's office, because I don't see anything of that nature currently.
Why do you think it took so long for the officer to be fully suspended? They were removed from duties, weren't they, for a few hours? I mean, it feels like to me as almost if it was overnight, and then this morning the suspension came in. Have you got any insight as to the delay in that process from what everyone had seen in the social media videos?
Well, I think it's clear from the second statement. They say that they have analysed the facts and the evidence. That's clear from the statement itself. So having done so, I think it's unreasonable, one, that they delayed so long in making that decision, and 2, that they haven't applied the same sanction to the other officers involved, using tasers unreasonably, striking individuals, unarmed, innocent Muslim individuals, and using pepper spray as well, unreasonably. So I can't comment necessarily as to the delay, other than the fact that it's unjustified, and they've had all of the evidence, and still only 1 individual has been suspended. We'd call for the other individuals involved in the excessive force and violence also to be suspended, so a full investigation can be carried out.
Majid, from where you're standing, how much of a factor is the fact that these were Muslims involved in this?
I think it's an extremely strong factor. I think it's safe to say that if those individuals weren't Muslim, maybe they were of another faith or different ethnicity, the incidents wouldn't have occurred in this particular way. And I say that because of the demonisation of Muslims in the media and generally. Now, you may be aware that 7 officers are being investigated for racial discrimination in the Greater Manchester Police. And that's just an example of the type of behaviour of police and how individuals who are Muslim are treated. And even in reference to the riots in Leeds, initially all of the right-wing media in particular were referring to the fact that there was Muslims that instigated these incidents, when in fact it wasn't. So the demonisation of Muslims means that young men such as these are seen as aggressive and are seen as a threat. And therefore that had a substantial impact, in my view, in terms of the action and unreasonable action of the police in this case.
OK, well, the investigation continues. Majid Iqbal, I do appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today. Majid, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.